Hello and welcome to Soul Elevation, guiding your ascension to new heights. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and I want to talk today about multidimensionality. So, this word gets thrown around a lot if you're on a spiritual path, a non-traditional spiritual path. I don't think they talk about it a lot in most religions, but multidimensionality is relevant to us as human beings. So I'm not going to go into what each dimension is because there are a lot of different perspectives on how many dimensions. Some people say there are 7 dimensions. Some people say that there are 12. Some people say 24. And some people say there are infinite dimensions. There is also um, a differentiation between density and dimension. And those words kind of get thrown around and intermixed. So I'm going to try to keep things pretty simple because it can get confusing. And again, different peoples have different perspectives on things. So I want to keep this more at what is it that we're talking about? What does it even mean to be multidimensional? And this is something that Cynthia Sue Larson and I get into a little bit in the latest episode of Soul Elevation. I think it's episode 468, I believe. Um, and she's amazing. I highly, highly recommend that you listen to that episode for many reasons. But she kind of goes through a explaining, like if you were, she shows it actually in the video. If you watch the video where she had like a piece of paper, and then she had like a pen, and she was saying, if you're the piece of paper and your perspective is this flat piece of paper and then this pen starts coming through it, what would your perspective be? Because you're just seeing it like kind of as it's almost from like a dissected, as it's moving through, you're only able to see the part of it that you have the perspective on. And so this is a beautiful way to help understand what multidimensionality is. Essentially, multidimensionality is that there is a lot more to our reality than we can perceive. So our eyes can only see what we would understand as the visible spectrum of light. So there is a small range of frequency wave that our eyes can pick up as light and we can perceive, the meaning we can see it. But we know that there are X-rays, there's Wi-Fi, there's gamma rays, there's microwaves, there are all these invisible energies that are energy waves that we use in this dimension, that we use in our everyday life, that we can't see, but they have function, right? So a microwave, we can't see the microwaves, but we very much see the result of the microwaves when we use them. And so the same thing with sound. So we can hear certain levels of frequency, but we can't hear everything. We can't say that that reality and all of creation is confined to what our ears can hear. Just think of, a dog whistle. Dogs respond dogs respond to dog whistles. We can't really hear dog whistles. You might hear a little pitch, but this is more of a silent whistle that other animals can respond to. You have beings like bats who use sonar. They're using sound that we can't hear. They're using it to track and locate, and dolphins use sonar too. And so there are all these energies and sounds that we can't pick up because that's to do with our biology rather than it being that those things don't exist. And so I also just interviewed Rob Gauthier. If you are familiar with him, he is a world-renowned channeler. He channels a lot of beings, but his first channelings were with a reptilian being. And this was is a benevolent reptilian being. And then he began interacting over the years also with that being's sort of higher self. And so in our interview, which hasn't been released yet, he talks about their understanding, their teachings of dimension. And they said something that I hadn't considered before, that light is the lightest energy that we perceive in our dimension, but it's the heaviest density that they perceive in their dimension. And I thought that was a really interesting way to think of like these dimensional layers and strata and how they kind of can overlap. And we can see this where people have mysterious sightings of, orbs or angelic beings or whatever that might be. It's, in my opinion, it makes sense that we're seeing a portion of what our eyes are able to pick up for, and that may just be temporary. It may be a temporary experience, but there's a lot more to that being in the dimension that is theirs that we can't perceive here. And so if what Rob's guides are saying is accurate, you can think of that as like light being this kind of intermediary, maybe light flows through all dimensions, or it is an intermediary, like a layer that we share between dimensions, like between a higher dimension and us. Light exists in both. And but for us, it would be like the very highest, and for them, it's the very lowest. So there's a lot more that they experience that we don't have access to. And so this goes into how there could be intelligent life on other planets, other star systems that we're not picking up on our equipment, like that NASA isn't seeing. And I don't know if there's anybody out there who still doesn't believe in extraterrestrial life. Um, there's been a lot of disclosure that's happened really rapidly in the last couple of years, and you know, really the government and news agencies are pretty much saying that there is intelligent life. And our military has had interactions with them, and there are all sorts of everyday people who are having experiences. So there is a lot of evidence out there that we are not alone. But I guess, I mean, I don't know really what we would consider the mainstream opinion about that now. So maybe there's somebody watching who doesn't believe in aliens because we don't learn about it in school, and it's not on the news every day. And there might be still people out there who are trying to um, offer alternative explanations when there are UFOs and so forth and contact. But I know that actually it was right before the major solar eclipse last year, in April of last year, and I was sitting next to this physicist. He was, I can't remember, an astrophysicist. I was on a plane and he was on his way to my town because he wanted to see the full eclipse, and it happened to be in my town. So I got to watch it from my backyard. But, and I was asking him about intelligent life on other planets, and he was saying he didn't believe it because we haven't found it. And we've got very sophisticated instrumentation and we're looking for it. But if our instrumentation is attuned to our senses, which it would be, right? You know, it's looking for signs of life as we would understand them in a terrestrial sense. So what does that mean? It would have to have water. It would have to be inhabitable. It would have to have vegetation. That's assuming that they have physical bodies. But when we talk about multidimensionality, the density keeps becoming less. The higher up in the densities you go, in the dimensions that you go, the less density there is. So you can get to other realms. I think when I talked to Rob, in his perception, or what his guides tell him is there are seven dimensions, and the seventh dimension is non-physical. So the beings that are there don't have physical bodies, which would mean that they don't have the same physical needs. They don't need to inhabit something that has vegetation in the physical sense. And so who knows? Our imaginations are the limits in terms of what it would be like for them and what our eyes and our instrumentation would be able to perceive. So this is, there's a lot that our human mind would have a hard time understanding because of our frame of reference, what we think of as life. And even though from a lot of the things, a lot of the research that I've done and a lot of the guests that I've talked to and the different things that ways that I've come to understand this is that even when you do start getting into the non-physical, there is still a lifespan there. Those are not necessarily eternal beings. They may still have a lifespan. So it's it is really it really opens up the possibilities of what life is and who our helpers are and what the possibilities are beyond Earth. The final thing that I want to talk about with multidimensionality is that it's not out there. We have all of these multidimensional, all these other dimensions are also right here with us in the invisible space. So that's another thing that science, can tell us is that I may be looking at the camera here on my computer, excuse me, and I don't see anything between me and the camera. It looks like empty space. But science can tell us that there are waves of light and waves of Wi-Fi and there are radio waves in here that are invisible. And if I had a radio turned on, I could tune into those. There are electrons and protons and neutrons, and there's all kinds of things in the air at the subatomic level, at the atomic level, even at the physical level, but it's so small that I can't necessarily see it, like little dust particles floating in the air, that if there was a beam of light coming through here, I'd be able to see really easily, but I can't see it in this light. So we want to expand our definition of reality beyond what our senses can pick up. And that helps us to open up and to be able to perceive more and more through the psychic senses what it really is available for us to tune in. Because, for instance, the souls of our loved ones who have departed, we may think of them as going to heaven, and we may think of that as being in the sky or being in a far off place, but it's right here. They're right here with us when we want them to be. They're right here, but they don't hold the physicality anymore, but they're still accessible. And there are a lot of people who have a lot of amazing experiences. Maybe you have had amazing experiences where you have been sure that you're interacting with somebody or something, but you can't see it. And that can be very, very real. One example of somebody who interacts with us all the time is a podcast guest that I had called Julie Conrad. And I know a lot of people have gotten a lot of solstice from her book, which I'll put the link in the notes. I think it's called Conversations in Between. But this is a book that she wrote with her mom, who is deceased. And Julie had some really beautiful stories to tell on our podcast episode. And Suzanne Giesman is another spirit medium, and I've had her on the show, and she She also has a documentary on Gaia right now called Wolf's Message. And that is an extraordinary documentary, an extraordinary story of an extraordinary soul who passed at, I think, age 29. And his ability to communicate and the level of information that he's communicating from the other side is mind bending. So these types of things, they're not in some, they show us they're not in some far away place. They're here and they're accessible. And we all have the ability to connect with them. And so I think that that will be all that we'll go into today on multidimensionality. But this really relates as well to the Galactic Summit, which is very quickly approaching. It's going to be Saturday. So I'm recording this on Monday, July 28th. Saturday, August 2nd is the Galactic Summit. And we've got 10 amazing guest speakers, and they're going to be talking about galactic contact, ET consciousness, and what that has to do with spirituality, your spirituality, humanity's spiritual evolution. What do those things have to do with each other? So we have amazing speakers: Debbie Solaris, Viviane Chauvet, Daniel Scranton, Tony Ghazi, Neil Gower, Kimberly Meredith, John Napolitano, Isha Patel, Ulrika Sullivan, and did I say all of them? I think I'm missing one. But I apologize for whoever. It's really hard to come up with 10 names off the top of your head. I think I missed one. But these are amazing speakers, and I'm just delighted to be able to put this together. So it's going to start at 3 p.m. Eastern US time. It's free, and the replay will be available for free for 24 hours. But you can also purchase lifetime access to the replay. It's only $27. It's so worth it. But I would definitely, more than anything, I recommend that you upgrade to the VIP, because there are some phenomenal, phenomenal gifts. So it's a one-time $55, which is nothing, I hope, for you. But you're going to get so much value. I think it's calculated at like over $500 worth of value. So do join for that in whatever capacity that you can. And thank you so much for being here. Have a beautiful week ahead. Many